My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasangran, Guru Piran Nyo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to continue with what we left off the last time, where um, we spoke about the qualities of the human mind and how we covered the first 12 qualities of the human mind that actually hinders us from meditation. And here I spoke about, the various things, the factors that actually impact the state of our human mind, which is the prerequisite for us to acquire the knowledge is actually peace and tranquility and quietude, how to get the mind to a state of quietude. And we saw a few qualities that disrupts that quietude, knowingly or unknowingly. Sometimes we think we are in full control of it, but it lurks in there. Somewhat like the cancer cells. Sometimes the cancer cells, the markers are down, but the cancer cells are lurking somewhere in our lymphatic system and other parts of the body. And then one fine day it just shows up and it starts, destroying the cells in our body. And eventually it, takes us down. So in that same way, there are factors that I spoke about, 12 factors that actually has an impact on the human mind. And that has an impact on the acquisition of jnana. And we see that, once the mind is disturbed by it, the mind finds it hard to acquire the knowledge and understanding of what the universe is all about, this notion or the concept of God, that's supreme, and the self. Far less not knowing about them, but also the interplay between all three of them. And we see that, when we don't acquire the knowledge or the wisdom, we are unable to acquire that Purushottama, the divinity, that God within us, that convergence of this divinity, the connected state. It is very difficult to get. So we see that first learn to treat the mind from all these various qualities that actually impacts. So the last time I spoke about the 12 qualities, from vanity to arrogance to pretension to anger, cruelty, ignorance, impurity. We also covered this whole notion of, one of the things that we lack sometimes is that the discipline to acquire the knowledge of all the great saints and sages that are written on all the spiritual books. Many of them have walked through this journey. They've documented things that work and things that does not work. There's also a lot of, knowledge on how to reason, how to have that rational thinking, more scientific, systematic way of understanding, and also the trainings and the values that one imbibes. So we see this, when we have that absence of that rigor in our mind, we are unable to have that mental capacity nor the stamina to seek that truthfulness, the truth within us. And we see that sometimes that, without that, we don't have faith in ourselves, in that greater force that powers us. And in that same sense, that when we don't discover that inner force within us, we are unable to control our senses, desires, our pleasures, and that reinforces back the disturbances in our mind. And sometimes we become very delusional. We think we know everything. And you see that the ego gets into its way. And, we believe things that sometimes are not true of the world and the experiences. So we see that they're all interconnected between, the things that, we don't build that resilience, and that comes back and reinforces that turbulence. I want to cover 6 more qualities of the human mind so that at least we all understand what is it that we need to do to address this. So the next one is actually about, the whole idea of, false values. We spoke about the false values. This is values that are centered on false premises. That means that it may not be true, but we think it is true. And this is because we lack that rational, thinking or the evidence-based reasoning. Sometimes I hear people, oh, when you meditate, you get all this value in this Vaikunda valleys, you get the experiences of this and that and all those things. Uh, a lot of it sometimes is just imagination. There's no evidence to this. That is why Swamiji says that, that Arivin Arival, he says that you have to, experience that blissfulness to be able to describe it. It's not something very theoretical or ephemeral. So here he gives that, when the mind is quiet and attain that quietude, the mind actually discovers or experiences that expandedness, the depth, and that oneness. So you won't have this, false experience of what it is. So another example is that, and I give these examples in this writing, is that, sometimes we think that we are very successful in this material world, and because we've got bigger titles and bigger cars and bigger homes and, all the things that are very material. So we have this false, illusion that our personality is bigger than, what it is. So we see that, we have that ego that grows, and the way we treat people, we see differences. So this stems from the fact that our mind is anchored on something, which is ephemeral, but yet we think it is permanent. So again, people become rude, people become egocentric, all this based on that, material identity that is also changing. So again, the false values that we hold on to things that is always changing and may not be what is real. So when the mind is anchored on something which is real, you see that the mind, loses this materiality, that ego that is anchored on that materiality. So again, you see that those who are in that path of spirituality, they don't focus too much on that material, the titles. Well, if the material world gives it, then they take it with a blessing. It's okay, thank you very much. But they know that it is not what they are, right? So the same thing when things are very tough, they say it's okay, no problem. That is also not, we're not impacted by this. You see, so but when somebody is at the surface, they go through this turbulence and we think that is real. So this is one thing that, the false values that the mind holds on to because it's focusing on the material reality that is constantly changing. The next one is actually about worry. There are people that constantly worry about things. Sometimes there are reasons to worry, and the problem is that the worry itself enables you to find the solution. So, yes, there may be a challenge ahead, whether it's financial or family or health or various things. And when we worry, sometimes certain worry is good worry, that it moves the mind to take action. But most people, when they worry too much, it cripples them. So it makes the mind shrunken. So and sometimes we see that they become so anxious and troubled by the current or whatever the potential state, they cannot move ahead. They won't take the necessary actions. They become very risk averse. Right? So again, we see that worry is another quality that makes the mind shrunken. It hinders it from going deeper. So always think whenever you have worry, meditate, introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate deeply on what is it that's troubling you. And as you do that, slowly you get to the bottom of the worry, and you say, okay, I'll find the solutions to solve this problem. Maybe I may not be able to find the solutions now, but I have a strategy to find the solutions, or get someone to work with me to find find the solutions. And slowly, slowly, you see that the worry will start dissipating and you'll be able to overcome it, as opposed to just totally being crippled by it. So again, this is something that I see many people go through this. And sometimes when you worry too much, there is a chemical changes that happens in us, and we see that what was a temporary chemical changes when we worry constantly too much for too long, it starts generating permanent changes in our brain, permanent changes in us. And we see that sometimes it's very difficult then to reverse it. Every day we do this, we see that we reinforce that worry in our mind, and you see that there's a chemical changes, the pathway changes, and to reverse it back becomes more and more challenging. So whenever you have worries, meditate for a while, or talk to somebody, talk to a guru, or talk to someone who can help you with those challenges. The next one is actually also another important qualities is another qualities that actually when we overdo it, we actually have an adverse impact on the human mind. This is actually about attachment. Attachment is actually a feeling of a kind of a bond to a person or a thing or a particular value, a course that one takes, or something that we like. Yes, attachment is very important, but when we overly attach, the mind cannot let it go. And what happens is that the whole process of meditating effectively is to learn to let go, at least for a short moment. So when we overly hold on to something, we see that letting go becomes very, very difficult. Particularly, it's like over attachment actually clouds our mind, and we see that it prevents us from having the ability to reason, and this is where we see that sometimes the mind, we become more and more biased about particular things or particular values or particular views. Sometimes this is where sometimes in certain teachings they become so dogmatic. They hold on to a particular thing. When we do that, we see that we prevent ourselves from learning new things. Sometimes we have to understand, acquire the knowledge, okay, let it pass, and move on to the next. So it prevents us from letting go, and trying new experiences, learnings, or trying to explore different things in life. So we have to learn to live to let live, right? Live to outlive. So sometimes when we hold on to too many things, we see that the mind is kind of shackled in chains, unable to break away and experience new things. So part of that meditational sadhana is to go deeper, and wider. Ultimately, everything becomes quiet and you have that oneness experience. So attachment, to the material realm prevents us from achieving that experience. The next one is actually on greed. And this is something that it may not be overtly clear to us, but sometimes we see that, people have that excessive desires, the extreme desires, for something or a person or a particular thing. The more we want of it. And this sometimes, happens to us as human beings. Most people have attachments and so on. And we see that we have that excessive desire to hold on to something. This is particularly actually with relationships, when parents have very close bond with children, they become, hold on to things. There's the sense of, children are growing up, and we see that they're slowly wanting to, develop their own identity and personality. We want to hold on to it. We don't want anybody else to have that experiences with them. And there's a sense of feeling threatened, of losing that. And slowly, slowly that you see that even the children find it so suffocating, and so the relationship becomes more and more challenging when it is supposed to be more understanding and love. So we also see that sometimes that happens with not just people, but also with things that we have. We hold on, we have this wanting more and more of something. And slowly what happens is that the mind, the desires just keep building and deepening. And we see that, the mind cannot be quiet, you see, and that prevents us from discovering or, being able to get to the sublime quietude state, which is very important for that meditational sadhana. The next one is actually on egos. Right? This is something that how we assess the world or the life, in everything that we do, with respect, to one's own personal state or self-interest, and we see this. We, most people, this is nature built things in us to survive in this material world. And it's built this ego in us to be able to, take actions purely based on self-interest, at times, at the interest of others. And this is something that nature has built us to survive as a species, right? So you see that, that ego is there to have that self-interest for self-preservation, right? But in this, if you go back to the times of, human beings starting to think and, coalesce together as a community, and you see that this is one of the survival skills that we Homo sapiens that actually developed it to be able to outlast many other species. But what has happened is that as we started evolving, that pure self-interest, purely looking after yourself, and maybe even your own tribe, has caused that this whole notion of, being very, very competitive with others, trying to outwin others. And so when that happens, you see that, it becomes you versus everyone else or others. So that can be destructive. What nature's built us to give us that ability to survive as a species and pass on our genes to the future generation as part of this preservation of that species becomes a competitive race. At times, it could be very destructive. So over time, human beings evolve to become successful. And over time, we see that we evolved our mind to evolve to be able to moderate and modulate that competitive nature in us towards cooperative nature in us to be able to, work with others. And that brought in a lot more peace and tranquility in people's life. But occasionally our animalistic instincts that come in and we compete, uh, intensively, sometimes at the expense of other people's interests, including our own interests. So how do we strike a balance? Yes, we can be competitive, but we also should be collaborative and cooperative to support things. So when you have purely competition, you see that sometimes you become very destructive to others. It impacts relationships. It impacts, the bond with people. And ultimately, you see that they become more lonely, more, it impacts their own state of mind. And you see that that leads to all the other challenges of the human mind. So how do we, you know, curtail and prune our ego such that it doesn't become overly, uh, you know, impacting others and us? And the last quality is actually about slander. You see, this is about, cutting people down with our words, damaging statements, and ruining people's reputation. This is something that this also sometimes happens to human beings. We as a species, we are competing in a space. Sometimes we are overly competitive. We try to, emotionally outwin people. So we say things, we do things to demoralize others. And this is part of that human nature when they become overly, uh, competitive, they will become overly critical at the point that they even destroy other people's personalities, destroy other people's, whole, reputation, so that you demoralize them. And this is something that great saints and sages say, that when we have that, qualities of destroying other people, epicenter of that starts with us, right? When we say bad things of other people, the epicenter of the badness reverberates in us. And as we see that, that becomes our core strategy of engaging the world, and you see that we use that as a way to be competitive. In that process, you see that our mind's DNA changes, because the way it becomes our way of engaging the world. And slowly, slowly, we see that, our mind, that slandering qualities, has an impact on how the world sees us, how the world interacts with us, as how we interact with the world. And we see that slowly, slowly, our own emotional state, our own psychological state is affected by, the words that we utter. And slowly, slowly, we see that, even though the beginning we feel, wow, great, I, destroyed somebody, or, outwin, outwitted somebody. And you see that over time, that continuously reverberates in us. And it is difficult for us to become peace and be at peace, that quietude. And we see that it is hard for the human mind to go deeper. So again, we see that these are the 18 qualities that we really need to pay attention. We may think that we have overcome this, but like the cancer cells, they're lurking deep down and slowly, slowly eating away. We don't realize, one fine day it just manifests, it magnifies. By then it's a little bit too late. So Mahans and great saints say that, uh, do not let the bud of these qualities, you know, be in the human mind. The moment you recognize it, learn to remove it completely, right? Otherwise, you're only treating the symptoms, but you're not treating the core of what this seeds of, qualities would ultimately lead. So I spoke about, so we have this 18, what they call asuric qualities, or qualities, that demonic qualities of the mind, that makes the mind astray from attaining, a more focused, a more peaceful mindset that is crucial for deepening our introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. So again, we see that, this prevents us from acquiring a very peaceful and illumined mind. So the whole idea is that, how do we neutralize this? So we need to first recognize it and be aware that these things constantly shows up at the doors of our mind. How do we not allow it to get hold of our mind, or walk into our mind quietly and lurk in the corners without us seeing, and eventually it just manifests? So again, first thing is to be aware of it. Second thing is to make sure that it doesn't enter our mind, nor allow it to get a grip of our mind. And if at all it shows up and it's there, we need to learn to, develop hacks, ways to neutralize it, right? There's qualities of the mind, so that it doesn't. So when we wake it, all this slowly, slowly, the divine qualities start showing up. When the mind is occupied by this 18, asuric qualities, it is hard to bring, or hard to nurture the 18 divine qualities, because the rooms of your mind is already full with this. when it's full of this, you cannot bring the divine occupants into the rooms of your human mind. And this is what, great saints and sages, the moment you have anger, it is very difficult to generate rational thought. So any one of this, the moment it manifests, you see your peace is gone. Meditation is very difficult, right? So the whole idea is that not a single one of this should be allowed to enter the doors of your mind. And this is the constantly being positive, constantly being, inspirational, being among people, reading the scriptures, doing the great things. You see, slowly you have this attitude, it's okay, never mind, these things of life is there, it's not going to impact me. So it's a kind of a different mindset that one gets. So this is what I want to cover. As I said earlier, if we are able to keep these 18 demonic or asuric qualities of our mind, you see that our rooms, our chambers of our mind is empty, and we can easily, allow the divine qualities to set pace in our mind to help us achieve a deeper, more enriching and more enlightening mind. That's what, one of the qualities of, the human mind is that when we hold on to this, the mind attains something called the karpanya dosha, spoken about in the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Krishna says, one has this karpanya dosha, mind shrinks. When the mind shrinks, it becomes unillumined, uninspiring, and you see that for us to get deeper knowledge to overcome the challenge becomes more difficult. So the acquisition of the Jnana Yoga, acquisition of the Purushottama Yoga becomes more and more challenging. Mahan himself has spoken about this. He gives all those different conditions of the human mind that we need to generate so that we can transition from the small I to the bigger I, the material personality to the spiritual personality, the finiteness to the infiniteness, the mortality to the immortality, and that more kind of transitory to a more eternal and permanent state of our human mind. And this is what, the first set of 18 qualities that we need to really understand. We need to take stock of it. We need to learn, we need to find new hacks or new ways of preventing them from entering our human mind. They can be at the outside of the door or the gate. It's okay. I recognize them, but don't ever entertain them into the human mind. If you did that, you see that slowly, the meditation becomes great. The introspection, contemplation, reflection becomes much more profound. We stop giving excuses. Every moment, we start becoming more and more deeper with our experiences. With that, I complete today's discussion. I will have more question and answer to discuss these 18 qualities. Next week, I'll talk about the 18 divine qualities that we should nurture. And when the human mind is absent of all these things, you see that the divine qualities shows up from within ourselves. Sandosha.